Alright, let's talk about Brazil. A country so nice, they named it after a tree. But how did this glorious land of samba, soccer, and surprisingly large rodents come to be? Settle in, because we're about to speedrun Brazilian history. Our story begins, as many do, with people already living there. Indigenous tribes were just chilling, minding their own business for thousands of years. Then, in 1500, a Portuguese guy named Pedro Álvares Cabral showed up, supposedly on his way to India. He accidentally bumped into a whole new continent. Oops. He looked around, saw a bunch of trees with reddish wood, and thought, Po Brasil, Brazil. Good enough. And just like that, Portugal called dibs. For the first few decades, Portugal was like that friend who claims your couch but never actually helps you move. They were more interested in the spice trade in Asia. But then they heard the French were sniffing around their new property. So they decided to actually do something with it. Their brilliant idea: sugarcane. Lots and lots of sugarcane. Now, who was going to do all the hard work? The Portuguese colonists certainly weren't going to get their hands dirty. First, they tried to enslave the local indigenous population. But that didn't go so well. The locals knew the land, could run away easily, and, well, they weren't exactly thrilled about the whole forced labor thing. So, Portugal moved on to Plan B, which was, unfortunately, the transatlantic slave trade. Over the next 300 years, millions of Africans were forcibly brought to Brazil in horrific conditions to work on the sugar plantations. This brutal system became the backbone of the colonial economy and left a deep, painful legacy that Brazil is still grappling with today. It's a dark, fundamental part of the story, and there's no sarcasm that can lighten it. It was, and is, a tragedy. Meanwhile, back in Europe, Napoleon was on his "I'm going to take over everything" tour. In 1807, he decided to invade Portugal. The Portuguese royal family, led by Dom João VI, packed their bags, grabbed the crown jewels, and did what anyone would do when a French army is at their doorstep. They ran away to their colony, Brazil. Imagine your landlord suddenly moving into your apartment and declaring it the new headquarters of the entire building. That's basically what happened. Rio de Janeiro became the capital of the Portuguese Empire. Dom João actually liked Brazil. He set up banks, libraries, and botanical gardens. For the first time, the colony felt less like a forgotten backyard and more like the center of the world. But all good things must end. Napoleon was defeated, and the Portuguese back in Portugal were getting a bit antsy. They were like, "Hey, king, you can come back now. This whole ruling from the tropics thing is weird." So, in 1821, Dom João sailed back, but he left his son, Pedro, in charge as regent. He reportedly told him, "Son, if things get messy and Brazil wants independence, don't fight it. Just put the crown on your own head." Best career advice ever. And guess what? Things got messy. The Portuguese government wanted to turn Brazil back into a regular old colony. The Brazilians, who had gotten a taste of being the cool kid, were not having it. On September 7, 1822, by the Ipiranga River, Dom Pedro dramatically drew his sword and yelled, "Independence or death." Spoiler alert, he chose independence. And thus, the Empire of Brazil was born, with Emperor Pedro I on the throne. A surprisingly bloodless revolution, mostly because the guy in charge of the colony just made himself the emperor of the new country. Efficient, really. Pedro I was a bit of a drama king. He was popular at first, but his authoritarian style and various political squabbles wore people down. After 9 years, he abdicated in favor of his 5-year-old son, Pedro II. Yes, a 5-year-old emperor. A team of regents ruled in his name for a while. a period so chaotic and full of revolts, it makes a family reunion look peaceful. Finally, when Pedro II was just 14, they declared him old enough to rule, an event cleverly named the majority coup, because why wait for puberty when you can just change the law? Pedro II, however, turned out to be a pretty decent ruler. He was a scholarly, calm guy who oversaw a period of relative stability and modernization for almost 50 years. Coffee replaced sugar as the main export, bringing in a new wave of wealth. Railroads were built, and immigration from Europe was encouraged. But there was still that massive, glaring issue: slavery. By the late 19th century, Brazil was one of the last countries in the Western world to still have slavery. The pressure to abolish it, both from inside and outside the country, was immense. Finally, in 1888, while Pedro II was away in Europe, his daughter, Princess Isabel, signed the Golden Law, officially ending slavery. It was a monumental step for human rights, but it had a massive political side effect. The wealthy, slave-owning landowners who had been the main supporters of the monarchy were furious. They felt betrayed. So, what did they do? A year later, in 1889, they backed a military coup. With their support gone, the monarchy just fell apart. Pedro II was peacefully exiled, and Brazil was declared a republic. Just like that. No big war, no dramatic final stand. The empire ended with a whimper, not a bang. The first few decades of the Brazilian Republic are known as the Old Republic or the coffee with milk era. Not because of a delicious breakfast, but because power was passed back and forth between the political elites from the coffee-producing state of São Paulo and the dairy-farming state of Minas Gerais. It was democratic, in the same way that choosing between two flavors of ice cream picked by your parents is a choice. This cozy arrangement was shattered by the Wall Street crash of 1929. The price of coffee plummeted, and the economy went with it. Inigo Senling, a politician named Getulio Vargas, seized power in a coup, ending the Old Republic. Vargas was a complex figure. He ruled for 15 years, first as a provisional president, then a constitutional one, and finally as a full-blown dictator of the Estado Novo, or New State. He was a populist who introduced labor rights, a minimum wage, and gave women the right to vote. He also censored the press, tortured political opponents, and had a weird admiration for European fascism. It's complicated. After World War II, the whole dictator thing wasn't very fashionable anymore, so the military kindly asked Vargas to step down. Brazil had a brief fling with democracy for about 2 decades. This period saw rapid industrialization and the construction of a brand new, futuristic capital city, Brasilia, built in the middle of nowhere. It was a time of great optimism and cultural flourishing, with the birth of bossa nova music. But political instability was never far away. In 1964, fearing a communist takeover and fueled by Cold War paranoia, the military stepped in again. This wasn't a short-term intervention. It was a full-blown military dictatorship that lasted for 21 years. The government censored art, music, and the press. Political opponents were exiled, imprisoned, and killed. It was a dark time of fear and repression, masked by an economic miracle that mostly benefited the rich and plunged the country into massive debt. By the mid-1980s, the people had had enough. Massive public demonstrations demanded a return to democracy. The military, facing economic crisis and a loss of public support, finally relented. In 1985, the dictatorship ended, and Brazil began its slow, often bumpy, journey back to democracy. And that brings us more or less to the present day. The last few decades have been a roller coaster of economic crises, hyperinflation, moments of incredible growth, political scandals, and social progress. It's been a wild ride of presidential impeachments, hosting the World Cup and the Olympics, and navigating deep political divides. So there you have it, the history of Brazil, a story of accidental discovery, sugar-fueled exploitation, a runaway royal family, 2 emperors, a coffee-powered republic, a populist dictator, a brutal military regime, and a chaotic, vibrant, and resilient democracy. It's a history as complex, contradictory, and beautiful as the country itself. Thanks for watching.